Xtalks is the industry leader in connecting life science, food, healthcare, and medical device professionals. The Xtalks Life Science podcast features insightful conversations with industry experts about all things pharma, biotech, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science podcast. My name is Vera, editor-in-chief at Xtalks.com, and this week I'm delighted to introduce a very special guest on the show. We have with us Jay Hartenbach, President and Chief Operating Officer of Diakonos Oncology, a company developing cancer immunotherapies to address the critical and unmet medical need of late-stage and aggressive cancers like glioblastoma. Jay is a passionate advocate for wellness and innovative healthcare, bringing a unique blend of scientific knowledge, entrepreneurial enthusiasm, and a business strategy expertise to the life sciences industry. Before moving to Biotech, Jay co-founded wellness company Medterra, where he continues to shape the company's strategic direction as chairman of the board. Jay also co-founded Perland Pharmaceuticals, an early-stage biotech company actively developing therapies for arthritis conditions. So to learn more about the work that Jay is helping lead at Diakonos Oncology in the cancer immunotherapy space, let's turn to Jay now. Jay, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Vera. I really appreciate being on.
Yeah, so just like learning more and reading more about you, we know that you had a path, like a very entrepreneurial path, and it spanned like wellness, pharma, and now immuno-oncology. I wondered, like, what drew you specifically to Diakonos?
Really, the research. I had the opportunity to interface with the PhDs in a company that I had started previously, Medterra, and really got to learn about what they were doing at Baylor. And when you look at the research, it was very compelling and a somewhat elegant solution that kind of deviated from what I think a lot of cancer immunotherapies are pursuing, where they're looking for a specific mutation. And so this was a much more holistic approach, it felt like. And so when I saw the research and really understood what they were trying to achieve, I immediately became attracted and wanted to help.
Great. Could you tell us more about like the specific mission and goals of Diakonos?
To put it simply, it's to commercialize, a potential cure or potential big leap forward in cancer immunotherapy and cancer care just in general.
Great. And could you tell us now, maybe let's shift to the cancer immunotherapy space today. In your view, what gaps in cancer immunotherapy exist today?
And, I think when we look at cancer immunotherapy, there's been so much progress, especially in comparison to conventional treatments that have a lot of collateral damage. And so immunotherapy really not only providing more efficacious results, but lower side effect profiles. The gap, though, that we see is taking advantage of cell therapy and the potential of cell therapy. It's undoubted that monoclonal antibodies and other immunotherapy developments have been critical to this path, but this exploration around cell therapy really we feel is the next step to unlocking even more results. And so it's how do you do that? How do you actually take advantage of the body's own immune system using its own cells to target and attack cancer in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and this brings us really to like what Diakonos is doing. So could you tell us like what is unique about Diakonos's like scientific approach compared to like other immunotherapies in development?
Within cell therapy, Diakonos is somewhat unique. There's been so much focus on, as an example, CAR T cell therapy in, leveraging T cells and initiating immune responses with these CAR T cell therapies. Diakonos takes somewhat of a different approach. There are other therapies that are pursuing what we are, which is dendritic cell therapies. And so instead of working with the T cell, we're working with the patient's dendritic cells. What we do, though, is somewhat unique within the dendritic cell sphere. We do something called double loading. And to put it simply, we take a patient's tumor antigens and load them both internally and externally into the dendritic cell and replicating effectively a viral infection with those cancer markers. And so that is a unique approach that has never been done before within dendritic cells. And we believe is why we're seeing such different results than prior dendritic cell attempts.
And so that's why the company decided to go into the glioblastoma indication, right?
Yeah, but I have to give credit to the founding scientist of Diakonos. It is somewhat unique for an early stage cancer immunotherapy company to be going after arguably one of the most difficult indications as validation. The team had significant amount of confidence from the preclinical studies that they had done to date, and really sought glioblastoma as a way to very quickly determine if this therapy was going to make a difference because of how difficult it is and how poor of a prognosis patients typically have with glioblastoma.
Yeah, I was wondering, could you talk a little bit more about glioblastoma and just like the disease itself and the unmet medical needs there?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Glioblastoma is the most common malignant form of brain tumor that uh, you know we deal with and face on a daily basis. There's about 14,000 cases a year in the U.S. alone, and so within glioblastoma, there is this significant unmet medical need because there's been just a lack of progress where other indications have seen substantial improvements in overall survival over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Glioblastoma, while it's seen some modest improvements, really hasn't seen therapies that really have changed patient outcomes in a meaningful way. And so, why glioblastoma is so difficult? Partly is you've got a very heterogeneous tumor. And so, therapies where, for example, a monoclonal antibody or even a CAR T cell therapy that's targeting a specific antigen may have some initial success, but often will fall short because they're not targeting the entire antigen profile or all of the tumor cells. In addition, you have to contend with the blood brain barrier, right? You have to figure out, however, whether that's a direct injection into the tumor or into the brain, or whatever the therapy you're providing has to be able to account for getting across this blood brain barrier. And so, it's a very aggressive, it's quickly growing, it's very difficult to resect. There's all of these factors that make sense as to why it hasn't seen the same level of progress as other difficult indications or once difficult indications. And so that's for us really exciting based on the results that we have seen, and certainly feel very encouraged about the path we're taking.
Great. And are there any other disease indications, any other aggressive tumor types that the company is developing therapies
Yes,
for?
yes. The team certainly did not want to take an easy path, and so we're looking at pancreatic cancer, and so we have a trial underway for pancreatic cancer. But in addition, refractory melanoma. So melanoma patients that had no longer or no longer responding to checkpoint inhibitor therapy.
And I'm just wondering, like, what is the connection between those three cancer types? Is there a
The
connection?
yeah, the connection is that they're very difficult and they have a large unmet medical need. As far as the actual cancer itself, they are very different in the cell type and how they behave.
So the company's mission was to go after these like very aggressive and hard to treat cancers. But how does the scientific approach for those three differ? Like, is the platform the same? Is just something is slightly changed?
It's a great question. That is part of the reason we're so excited about the work that we're doing. And initially, when I read the preclinical studies, the team was seeing success across a variety of different cancers. And so, when we think about our approach, we're simply taking those very specific amino acid sequences that are unique to the cancer and loading them into the dendritic cell. From a dendritic cell perspective, it doesn't really make a difference if it is glioblastoma or pancreatic cancer. It's simply just mounting an immune response against cells that it thinks are virally infected and presenting the antigen specific to that virus. And so for us, the only difference between glioblastoma and pancreatic cancer in our soon to be refractory melanoma study is where we're getting a sample of that tumor and where we're going to ultimately do the injection into the patient. As far as the manufacturing, though, it's identical.
Okay, that's that's really interesting. Um, I was wondering, do you see any potential for Diakonos' approach to be expanded to other tumor types?
Absolutely. That there's a realization that within cell therapy or just cell therapy in general, is certainly not for every type of cancer, not from a efficacy standpoint, but just from does the complexity or is the complexity warranted? So, for example, early stage prostate cancer has a variety of other treatment options that would and most likely are sufficient. And so we see the opportunity in these difficult unmet medical needs. Late stage ovarian cancer would be another example, or renal cell carcinoma. And so for us, that's where we think there's an opportunity. You've got unmet medical need that warrants the expense and the effort to generate a personalized treatment.
Yeah, and so the company's already tackling like three tumor types in those three different indications. I was wondering, could you share like where is the company headquartered and how many employees are working there currently? Because it seems like it has like very ambitious targets.
Yeah, it's certainly an ambitious plan. The company's headquartered in Houston. We have just about 20 employees. And so, to your point, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we are as efficient as we certainly can be and are getting a lot done for the size of team that we have.
Yeah, certainly. Um, and for two of the indications, glioblastoma and pancreatic cancer, is the company is in like clinical testing right now, clinical
Yep.
research stages?
That's correct. Yeah, the glioblastoma study, we completed our phase one in 2024, and we've opened up our phase two as of March of this year. And so we're already enrolling patients across a variety of different trial sites. The pancreatic cancer trial is a phase one that's open at Baylor College of Medicine, and the refractory melanoma study will be opened at the end of this year. And so, and with those, the glioblastoma and pancreatic cancer, we were fortunate enough to receive fast track designation from FDA as well to help accelerate the development if the results continue to be as promising as they are.
Great. And I saw that the company recently completed an oversubscribed funding round. Could you share, are there any priorities for like next steps in advancing any plans in development?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the most recent round that we just closed is really so that we could start with the phase two glioblastoma study as well as to expand into the refractory melanoma study. We ultimately will be pursuing a Series A later this year, but based on the demand from trial sites or clinical sites across the US that had seen the phase one glioblastoma data and wanted to get started, we saw an opportunity to do this $20 million safe round as a precursor to the Series A to start that work and get started with the trial.
Okay, that's really interesting and really ambitious, like really ambitious goals for this year, truly. I was wondering, there certainly must be like a great value from like partnerships, whether they're clinical, academic, or corporate. Um, how do partnerships help Diakonos' work? Can you share any examples from the academic or corporate side?
Absolutely. One of the participants in the safe round and has been just a great partner to Diakonos really since its inception was Baylor College of Medicine, where the preclinical research was conducted and where that phase one pancreatic study is currently underway. The value of that is one, when you become closer, right, it solidifies the partnership and just continues to make things even more efficient because there's obviously established trust. The other benefit is it's an external validation. With dendritic cells, there's somewhat of a reputation that they're not effective. We believe we've got 15 years of preclinical research as to why, and the lack of double loading. But having partners like Baylor College of Medicine or the Brain Tumor Investment Fund that also participated in the safe round, you get this validation, right? It's not just us telling everyone that we think we have something promising. You've got very sophisticated groups looking at the data, the team, the plans, and recognizing that there is an opportunity and that they want to participate as both an investor and a partner.
Great. And this kind of brings me to my next question, which I was wondering, like, what does your day-to-day look like at Diakonos as president and chief operating officer, or is there even like a day-to-day for you?
It has evolved. When I first started, the team was much smaller. You're wearing a lot of hats, and you're wearing a fundraising hat, and you're wearing a recruiting hat, as well as trying to facilitate as much clinical development as you can. As the company has matured and we've advanced, my role has really shifted into making sure that we have the best possible team members, and that they're able to do the work that they need to do. And so I certainly helped and assisted the most recent fundraising round, but also really I'm proud of the team that we were able to assemble over the last year. And so my job really now is to make sure I can get out of their way and as problems arise to help facilitate solutions.
Great. And now, perhaps let's shift to the field of cancer immunotherapy in general. Since you're very deeply involved in this space, can you share like what advancements or can we expect to see in the field of cancer immunotherapy in the next couple of years? Are there any that excite you the most?
I think we're getting, with the amount of, this is a somewhat of an example. When we look at cancer patients for 5, 10 years ago, very few of them were even cryopreserving that tissue if there was a resection. And now that's becoming much more standard practice. And so what we're getting now from a research standpoint is just even better understanding of these cancer cells, the sequencing, the genes, and certainly opportunities to develop therapies around that. And so I think we're going to continue to experience just an explosion of information and understanding. The other part of it is it with the way that the world works and the data becoming more and more accessible. I think there's just a lot more collaboration happening and will continue to happen as we're getting additional data. When we were developing this phase 2 glioblastoma study, we wanted to leverage an external control group to further power the study. And we realized that there wasn't readily accessible glioblastoma data that a company could reference and use as part of this external control. And so that's something that we've actually looked at and are trying to identify how we can partner with groups like the Brain Tumor Investment Fund and the American Brain Tumor Association to do so. Not only would that benefit us, but that would benefit all groups that are studying glioblastoma. And so those efforts, we're not the only group looking at doing that, but those combined efforts, I think, will make the data more accessible and really accelerate advancements in cancer therapy development.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said and making data sharing a better practice in the industry. I think that's really important. I think
Yeah.
that's so important from like academia too. Especially when or if you're trying to publish your results, like making data more accessible to researchers, I think that would just advance science as a whole much faster. So I'm really glad that you gave that input. I found it so valuable. And I guess to wrap up, I had a question where I was wondering if there's any advice that you can give to other entrepreneurs, but now not just entrepreneurs, since you're also involved in like hiring a lot of scientists, I believe, and a lot of like biotech industry professionals. What
Sure.
advice would you give to not just entrepreneurs, but scientists as well, who are looking to break into biotech and really make an impact on patient lives?
I think the first recommendation would be that whatever you're pursuing, to make sure that it's meaningful, that you truly believe in it. This industry, there's so few success and there's so much failure, and that's not the fault of anyone. And we're all trying to do really difficult things. And so, given the challenge and the complexity of what this industry does on a day-to-day basis, I think having absolute conviction in what you're doing is essential. Going beyond that, as you're looking at building out your team and potentially collaborating, it's a recognition that a hiring process is always going to be imperfect. And I learned early on in my career that you could have someone incredibly talented and capable, but just may not be the right fit for what you're needing to do or what the company needs to do. And so uh, I think having open and honest conversations as you're one establishing what you expect, and certainly as things move forward, is critical, because what we're talking about is patients' lives, and to make mistakes is certainly expected, but repeated mistakes are certainly problematic in this industry when you really can't afford to make too many of them. And so I think having a larger recognition of what you're trying to do really helps, kind of steer your day to day and how you actually build out that team.
Great. Well, Thank you so much, Jay, for being on the show today. I really appreciate your time for this insightful discussion.
Great. Hey, thank you for having me on.
And that's the end of this week's episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
To join the Xtalks community, visit xtalks.com and register for exclusive access to curated content like live webinars, news articles, and educational videos. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policy or position of Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.